Joan, you're in this seat right here. Go that way. And before I get started, I'm going to ask everybody to turn them off. No recordings are allowed, and make sure you've turned it down. And I found out that if I just press that knob and Surrey comes up, I just tell him to turn the whole thing off for me. Thank you. Before we got started, I just want to say that we drew names, and Joan, you'll be starting, and then Jenelle, and then Frank on the first question when we get there. Just so if you're worried about what order you're going in, we'll change that around. Good evening. I'm Dulcie Sin, tonight's moderator, and a volunteer for the American Association for University Women, AAUW, the Lompoc Vandenberg branch. AAUW is a nonpartisan organization committed to a mission of equality for all and is open to all genders. AAUW is very pleased to host these forums with our colleagues at the League of Women Voters North County. The League is a political organization encouraging the informed and active participation of citizens in government. It influences public policy through education and advocacy. These nonpartisan forums are provided as a service to our local community. We chose this meeting room because it is wired for internet connection for our Zoom participants and PEG TV viewing. If anyone's at home, they could be watching on Channel 23. Dual language live interpretation is also available on Zoom webinar, and there is plenty of comfortable seating here. And I'm very pleased to see so many people coming out on such a blistery night. Finally, we acknowledge that Lompoc Vandenberg rests on the ancestral land of the Chumash people. AAUW honors the Chumash elders, past, present, and future. We come together tonight following the Chumash tradition to learn and grow as a community. And we're beginning right now with our District 3 candidates. The 3rd District Supervisor represents over 92,000 people spread out over the largest land area of all 5 districts, the City of Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, the Goleta Coast, and the Gaviota Coast, and the western 2/3 of the City of Goleta. Welcome and thank you to all the candidates for your participation tonight. Okay. Now we do that slide. Before we get started, let's review the forum structure. And this is it. Our speaking order has been drawn at random. All the topic areas will be shared with all the candidates. Each candidate will have a 2-minute opening statement. And then as I ask the question, each candidate will have a 2-minute response to that question. They answer all the questions, and then we come back with a 1-minute follow-up on that. Now, I will tell you that you have 2 minutes to answer questions, but if you can do it shorter, that's fine too. We'll get through more questions. We'll be ending at 7:20 tonight, and there are timers. Where are my timers here? There are 2 people up here in the front. They have paddles that they will raise to let our candidates know that they've completed the first minute, and when they get a yellow paddle, they only have 30 more seconds to go, and the red paddle will be raised when time is expired, and you must stop speaking. These ladies are very rough with those paddles if you don't. Our questions have been prepared after soliciting input from the community, taking the questions asked when you all registered online, and several long committee meetings. No questions will be taken from the audience tonight, so please, as I said, silence your cell phones, and because of our tight time constraints, I ask you to hold your applause until the closing statements, and then we can all cheer a lot. So, with that said, we'll begin with the 2 minutes. Joan, your name was drawn first, and then Jenelle, and then Frank Troise.
Thank you. Lompoc is among the cities of all that I've represented that has not developed a community-driven vision. And this is a hindrance because there's no consensus on the top issues, and it works against collaboration. There are many points of light in Lompoc, but they haven't yet come together to make a great flame because there's no shared understanding of what the community is trying to achieve together. And without this shared understanding, there's no way to measure success and hold leaders accountable. So, it's up to the city really to develop a vision or not. When Lompoc came into the 3rd district, I determined to figure out what is it that people want. So I talked to community leaders. I showed up at every event I could think of. I sent out a survey that asked not only what are the most important issues to you, but where's the biggest gap between what's important and what is? And 3 concerns rose to the top: homelessness, youth well-being and violence, and economic vitality. Economic vitality is a key factor related to the others. Just one aspect of my work, I've jumped in to focus on the Lompoc Theater. It's sitting vacant on an unkempt corner of Lompoc, and it symbolizes, when it rises, the rise of Lompoc as a whole. Theaters are known to be tides that lift all boats, and it creates a destination for customers, for nearby businesses, and it supports a cohesive community. I was delighted that I was able to help reframe the theater project materials, bring potential funders, and secure $2.5 million, and that will really help restoration get off the ground. Lompoc, it means lagoon, but it has been mistranslated as stagnant waters. Estuaries are really the most productive ecosystems on Earth. They're dynamic places, and that is very much what Lompoc is becoming, and I want to contribute and be part of Lompoc Rising.
Thank you, Joan Hartmann. Jenelle, you're next. And I just want to remind all 3 candidates that we are being translated, so please speak clearly and a little slowly. Thank you.
Thank you. Many of you in this room know me as your mayor. I love this community. And I ran for city council and then mayor after serving for 4 years on the Economic Development Committee. To say that Lompoc doesn't have a vision and doesn't have plans to improve itself is a sad assessment by our current representation. We recognized early all of the issues that we had and set forth a plan to accomplish and turn this community around. That was our vision, to dig ourselves out of debt, to be a community you could be proud to live in, work in, and be from. 3 members of that Economic Development Committee now serve on the City Council. When the current incumbent took over our representation 2 years ago, I met with her, and we talked about the top 3 issues that the county and its budget controlled in our community, and homelessness was at the top of it. Ideas were exchanged, monthly meetings were held, and none of those results have actually occurred. We talked about housing needs and how the county could support that, and that has failed us. I'm running because I've watched all the work we're doing here locally to improve our community run into roadblocks at the county level. With the district lines we've drawn, we finally will have a voice once again in the county as the 3rd largest city. It's been since Dwayne Holmdahl and Diane Owens sat in that seat since we've had a strong voice there, and I want to be that strong voice advocating for Lompoc and the rest of the 3rd district. Thank you.
Thank you. Frank?
First off, thank you everybody for coming out tonight, and I really appreciate you coming here, and thank you to the League for putting this event together tonight. I'm not a big believer in coincidences. We had an event similar to this in Goleta with the League of Women Voters, and there, candidly, I held the incumbent's feet to the fire on her record, on her issues, and on her 8 years in office. Since that hard discussion, there was a public op-ed written by a grifter who, in that, threatened my campaign by saying he would endorse my opponents. Since that hard discussion in Goleta, there's been a massive series of negative email campaigns that have hit in the past week and a half. One just hit 2 hours ahead of this event. Since that hard discussion in Goleta, there's been hit pieces in the local media that have attacked me personally and this campaign. Let me make one thing very, very clear. Our campaign, my campaign, will be honest, and I apologize, it's going to be direct. Myself and the deputy sheriffs will not run a negative campaign. And let me be clear, the reason why we don't need to do that, because none of you are here because you're happy. We don't need a negative campaign to galvanize you to vote on March 5th. You're all tired of politicians, you're tired of the status quo. And I want to be clear, this is not a Democratic issue. This is a series of folks who are a political machine and want to stay in office and stay in power. Lastly, to the media, you had some fun this week as a function of some numbers, and let me hold your feet to the fire. The numbers you didn't highlight this month, while trying to create a spectacle around something that didn't mean anything, there were 11 fentanyl deaths in the month of January, and no one talked about it. So to the media who's here tonight, what have you done in service to the community? I very much look forward to the conversation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Jenelle, you're up. And our first question has to do with homelessness. The numbers are increasing. What are your plans to provide housing for the homeless and the necessary removal of the illegal encampments?
Thank you for that question. Again, this was identified long before we had representation at this level on the county. The county receives all of the funding to address homelessness. The city receives none of it. While I was running to be mayor in 2018, we elected as a council to clean up the riverbed, and we spent $500,000 of your hard-earned reserve dollars out of the water fund to clean up the riverbed. The county contributed about $80,000 to the 30-day facility that we used as a transitional location to assist those that were in the riverbed and house them. We never saw a single dime to support much of the riverbed that is multi-jurisdictional. So we cleaned up portions that don't belong to us. Unfortunately, I didn't have a council willing to pay for the maintenance because they wanted to see funds come from the county. So here we sit again, and we joined with the county in an application for riverbed encampment funds so that we could clean up the riverbed and address the encampments there once again without going into our reserves and going into debt doing it, with a promise that we would assist with maintenance long-term from the council. Unfortunately, I heard that last night, the incumbent threatened our community and said if we don't build more transitional housing, that money would not be spent here. We have enough low-income housing. There is transitional housing. We lack middle, missing, and executive-level housing where those that have gotten better and low-income can move into and free up housing. So, the solution exists, the assistance exists. Being held hostage to it is dangerous, and I dislike it. So I'm willing to work hard to do it, but not being held over a barrel.
Frank?
I had an ironic opportunity to see this firsthand, and I first shared this with everybody in Santa Ynez earlier this week. Carol, can you raise your hand? Carol, raise your hand. You don't need to stand up, just raise your hand. Good. Carol, God bless her, is probably about 90 pounds soaking wet. Carol is also, I've got scars on my back from her beating me up politically in terms of what I should do and not do. And I enjoy that. And I enjoy getting thrashed around. We were having breakfast at the Cajun Kitchen right across from Albertsons. And as Carol was beating me up, I noticed she's starting to look out the window. And you see shadows going by the window. And homeless individuals walking outside. I turned to Carol and I said, what's going on? We're having a political conversation, but you seem like you're completely distraught. Meanwhile, I'm being a complete narcissist. Like, why aren't you focused on me? And she shared with me, I don't know if I can go to my car myself. Think about that. And this landed in Santa Ynez, and nobody there in the community could appreciate the fact of what that meant for the local store to go from El Rancho to their car, and for Carol, that's a life-changing event for her to do that. Let me say this tonight. You should assume every time I talk, I'm prefacing with, once I address homelessness, she needs to get to her car. You need to get to your car. This is a public safety issue first and foremost. Solution near term, believe it or not, I'm actually adhering to what Sacramento is saying, SB 43. We move them from point to point. How do you do that? You have revenue. which we've proposed and we'll talk to later. As you leave here tonight, the question I want you asking yourself relative to the three individuals up on this stage, who's going to make you safer relative to that problem with homelessness? Thank you.
Thank you. Joan, please.
And I have 2 minutes? Okay, yes. When I first came to represent Lompoc, I did meet with the mayor, and she told me in order to get reelected, I need to do something about homeless. And I said, well, I'm in, I want to help you. Lompoc needs that. But you have to find a place to put people. You can't simply drive them elsewhere. Most of the homeless come from urban areas. They don't come from small little towns. They don't come from farms. They come from urban areas. Historically, the nonprofits dealt with homeless, but as the problem has grown, the county provides service, and usually the cities provide housing. In the case of Lompoc, because it is not a wealthy community, we offered to do all the housing and provide an opportunity to really bring people for long-term out of the riverbed. In order to get grant money qualified from the federal or state government, you have to use that money either for housing or for services. It's not eligible for cleanup. Lompoc has not been willing to take grants with those requirements. And so it's really Lompoc's decision, not the county's. The Lompoc participates in a continuum of care. That's a collaborative organization that decides where a lot of these funds go. So Lompoc does have a voice. I'm the one to deal with encampments, however, because I pioneered the tiny home village. We know how to deal with long-term unsheltered people. Get them into small little homes where they can live in a village, get up in the morning, develop a plan, work with services. We've seen that it works. What we did in Isla Vista was a 6-month plan. We've now got 3 other villages because it was so successful. Dignity Moves and nonprofits pay for the housing. We get the land from the cities, and the county provides the service. It works. You can deal with your homeless problem, but there isn't a community-driven vision. It's a top-down vision, and people are hungry to talk about this. When we have forums, people show up, many, many people, because they don't know from their own government what's happening. So I've been eager to try to show people.
Now, our candidates have 1 minute to add to what you said or to rebuttal.
I was thrilled when our prior county representative placed the tiny homes at Bridge House. It was 10 tiny homes that were dedicated to assist with those encamped in the riverbed. And that was really helping. When we had our point in time count in 2021, I discovered that they weren't expanding out there and creating a wraparound full campus at the Bridge House because of septic issues. So I offered to the county that you could connect to our utilities. We'll help and work with you. Then you can expand and build more transitional housing, day shelter, workforce development, case management, all at Bridge House. Because right now, Bridge House is solely an emergency shelter that leads to everyone having to leave every day and come into town, and they don't make it into town. They go back into the riverbed. So that needs to change. That hasn't happened. The septic has failed, and now we're being told because they don't have the room, they won't clean up the riverbed.
Thank you. Frank.
Thank you. I think my point was very clear. I don't need the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joan?
All right, the county has just, in record time, spent $600,000 to fix the septic out there, and I don't believe it was Ms. Osborne's suggestion. But we did fix it, and we can keep the population stable. But we are now in the process of developing a state-of-the-art design for the Bridge House, which will include city water and sewer, and that will enable us to expand out there. We plan to have health services, we plan to have drug-assisted treatment, we plan to have workforce development. That will be a state-of-the-art facility with a new kind of live arc housing that has a 100-year lifespan and is only $200,000 per unit. So that will be a state-of-the-art model at the Bridge House near Lompoc that I believe is going to be adopted by other cities and other homeless looking for looking for permanent housing.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Frank. Gun deaths by accident, homicide, suicide is now the #1 killer of our youngest and most vulnerable. Alcohol and drugs are killing our young teens and adults. Mental health and family support services are key for handling the challenging issues that lead to homelessness, overwhelm law enforcement, property crime, and domestic violence. How will you increase accessibility, quality, and affordability for services to deal with this increase of death by despair?
Well, first off, I appreciate we're going off menu as it relates to the topics we agreed beforehand for the debate. So I appreciate we're now going to do a little bit of freelancing. A key part of my campaign has been the support of the deputy sheriffs as it relates to public safety. And one of the key things that the incumbent made clear in the Goleta event, that public safety is quote unquote a downstream issue. Ladies and gentlemen, public safety is 50% underfunded as it relates to what they need. And the best example I can give you of that is every time you see a squad car go by, you'll only see one individual in the car. I grew up in New York City, there was always two. There was always a backup. And these men and women are 24/7 doing what they do. That said, the other fallacy here as it relates to the numbers in preventative care, last week it was presented to the board, and I'm going to admit this to everybody in the room, I actually made a mistake. The sheriff called me up and corrected me, and he said, Frank, you need to be clear with your facts when you talk to people because you said there were 1,400 outstanding arrest warrants. I was wrong. There were 14,000 outstanding arrest warrants in the county of Santa Barbara. This is not a downstream problem, ladies and gentlemen. There are people in our community that one of us has made a decision that maybe I beat my wife, maybe I'm held at knife point versus gunpoint, maybe I robbed a store for less than $980, and that's a pass. We need revenue, and our campaign and our platform has been crystal clear about our ability to generate $200 million of recurring revenue per annum for the county so we can operate at a fully funded budget, not a balanced budget. And I hope we have the opportunity to talk about that because that was what we agreed to talk about ahead of time. Thank you.
All right, Joan?
Yes. The good news is that homicides in Lompoc are down by 20% and robberies are down by 37%. The bad news is that the rate of assaults with the firearms has skyrocketed by 300%. The city of Lompoc has worked hard to invest in its police department, which works valiantly with chronic understaffing. But this issue is not one for law enforcement alone, and that's my point. As Santa Maria's former police chief said, we can't simply arrest our way out of this problem. It takes a coordinated and concerted community response. They created Fighting Back Santa Maria to deal with gun violence. Collective Communities Creating Change is a Lompoc nonprofit that formed in response to the tragic shooting death of Lompoc soldier Marlon Brumfield in 2019. I support C4's efforts with grants, with office space, with technical assistance. Our County Department of Social Services is working with C4 to implement a self-healing communities model that engages troubled neighborhoods, healing and making decisions for themselves about how to improve conditions there. We're developing a mini grant program for neighborhood leaders to carry out their improvement ideas and to foster leadership development from within neighborhoods. I'm joining with C4, Moms Demand Action, and Congressman Carbajal on Saturday, February 10th from 4 to 6 to sponsor an educational workshop, Empowerment and Community Safety. It'll feature training on the Be Smart Safety Framework and a trigger lock giveaway. If Communify's Santa Maria experimental program that identifies at-risk families and focuses intensive services on them proves successful in reducing gun violence there, we'll be bringing that to Lompoc too. The issue requires a concerted and coordinated whole community response, and now.
Jenelle?
So I do want to thank the supervisor for the work she's doing on this. It's very much appreciated. It's long overdue in our community. But there's so much more that we need before we can heal our community. Our kids need to know what the path out of violence is. What are the jobs locally? Can they buy a house? Can they raise a family here? Or will there only be gangs as an opportunity to pull themselves out of the poverty they're experiencing? Our school system is failing because we haven't passed a bond, yes, but it's also failing because we have 30% low-income housing. So that's 30% Section 8 housing that is not paying taxes. That means it's not funding the school district. Until we have a healthy school district, until we have the jobs here, so people don't have to leave, that are living wage jobs, it doesn't matter how much we offer to heal our community. Our kids need to feel safe. They need to know there is a path besides the gangs, and that takes absolutely community work, but we can't swoop in and try and save our children. We have to teach them the tools. And that starts by all of us working to help our school district improve recruiting jobs and making sure we have housing so that the funds are there and we're not dependent on the county. We're not desperate to have outside organizations solve our problems, and we don't get dumped by them in 3 years when they've spent all their money and disappear on us as they do time and time again. It is exhausting watching groups come in, identify our community as a needs-based community, get their grants, fund us for 2 or 3 years, and then walk away and say, find the funds. It has got to stop. We have to find a sustainable model that allows our youth to learn there is a different path, and that takes more than just healing.
Thank you. 1 minute to add anything you'd like to add.
I'm going to use the time. Dulcie, I apologize, but you asked a question that wasn't agreed to beforehand, and one of us literally read a script. So literally, someone was given the questions to this event beforehand, and this is not an objective event. And if that's the case, and if I see incidences again of a question being asked and someone reading from a script, I'm going to walk out that door because this is not an objective event. So I'm putting that here now for the record. You gave us an agenda. You told us what to prepare for. You asked a question that we did not agree to ahead of time.
Okay. John?
So let me start by saying the sheriff's budget has increased by 43% over the past few years. We invest heavily in the sheriff, and the other point I want to make is that it is very critical that we educate the young people in Lompoc for the jobs that are already going vacant. We have jobs, well-paying jobs, as auto mechanics, $100,000 a year, heavy equipment operators, $100,000 a year, and more jobs are available out at the base. They're going wanting because we do not have a workforce that's capable of meeting those qualifications. And so we need to invest here in Lompoc. Otherwise, those jobs are going to go to outside people coming in, competing with the people here for housing, driving up costs, and creating greater inequality. We need to invest in the workforce pipeline. I'm doing it. I'm working with the Lompoc Unified School District and others.
Okay. Our next question then, we come back and begin with, where are we, with Joan now? Again, okay. I lost track there for a second. Now that the county housing element has been accepted by the state, the county will have to rezone properties. What do you think of the new housing elements, and what will you do to address the issues of balancing needed affordable housing and preserving prime agricultural land?
This is a very complicated question. We're striving to find a balance between two critical needs: protecting lands, agricultural lands, and addressing the desperate need for housing. Agriculture is this county's #1 business, and agriculture, anybody I talk to doesn't want to become Orange County. We're one of the top 10% of counties nationwide in terms of what we produce in agriculture. But we also need housing. In 1983, housing cost 4 times annual income. Now it's 22 times. I looked today, the average cost of a house in Lompoc is $609,000, and that's going up about 12% each year. So the strategies to increase housing include 475 new units at Buellton Ranch that took 10 years to get to because of a lawsuit between the city and the Mission Hills CSD. more employer-provided housing. I'm working with Congressman Carbajal to change the Department of Defense formula that limits the amount of on-base housing for military people. There's also an opportunity to put more housing outside the base for others who work there. The school district is working to develop housing on some of its land for faculty and staff. The city is leading the way on ADU streamlining, and that is really to be commended. LAFCO is launching a proactive effort to analyze where development around cities should occur and where it shouldn't occur, and to do this up front so that we can develop agreements before issues like Bailey Avenue come to a head. Another key strategy, and I can't emphasize it enough, is workforce development, so that we can have people from within developing the skills to be able to have the good jobs here and not have to bring more people outside to do the work.
Thank you. Jenelle?
So many assumed I was running against the current incumbent solely because of a failure to allow the Bailey Avenue annexation to occur. It's an accumulation of things, but let me get back to that. I was then accused that I wasn't willing to protect prime ag land. And here's the thing, I was a board member for Econ Alliance and part of the founding board that started the Ag Forum, and I have watched the local economy become $1.9 billion in ag revenue. Now, the highest ag is for strawberries, and those are great, but most of that is an export, and we all don't live on strawberries. So yes, it's important to protect those jobs. It's important to protect ag land. It's important for that revenue to come in. But Bailey Corridor was not a prime ag land. That was an envelopment of the city around land that the farmer no longer wanted to farm and was willing to build the kind of housing we need to create a balanced housing market so that we had more middle missing housing and executive housing for the expansion that is happening at the base, both for the military members and SpaceX. SpaceX currently has nearly 300 jobs coming and 100 jobs open. They are not buying houses in town and volunteering in our schools and volunteering for our committees and commissions and our churches and our businesses because they can't find housing here. So the reverse commute is occurring. So yes, prime ag land and protecting it is vital. Dropping housing all around Goleta, when Goleta's been the only South County town to build aggressively since its incorporation, is a burden, and ignoring a community that's willing to grow and have a balanced housing that isn't redlining on race anymore, but is redlining on socioeconomics is a dangerous path.
Thank you. Frank?
Thank you. To be candid, I think Jenelle said a lot, and we're actually in quite a bit of alignment on that. Let me just highlight a couple of points. I was down in an event the other night in Goleta, and I've never seen 250 people more upset than I did in that room. Alongside that, to Janelle's point, the two politicians that were responsible for the discussion regarding the annexation are here, so I'm not going to touch that. I'll leave that to them both in terms of, and I'll give the time to them in the rebuttal. I do think there's something interesting that I'd like to highlight about the Goleta event. The incumbent did a wonderful job with the audience of saying, I can't do anything, it's out of my control, the governor's going to fine us, the governor's going to penalize us, we have a bunch of these codes and violations we need to adhere to. I can't do anything because I would be breaking the law, quote unquote, or I'm paraphrasing. This is laughable to me, given that this same individual on the same board of supervisors had no compunction about breaking the law as it related to the ambulance contract. So we have a selective memory in terms of how and when we do that. Let me keep this simple. I'm not going to get into an argument with you about the annexation because I totally agree with Jenelle and I want her to have my time. Who's going to ultimately stand up to Sacramento? That's the real question here. Who will have, of the three of us, no problem whatsoever standing up to Sacramento and using a key word that my wife keeps reminding me is a full sentence, no.
Thank you. We'll come back now to Joan for 10 minutes.
Yes.
1 minute.
I serve on the LAFCO board with Ms. Osborne, and she took an oath today to be sworn in to defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of California. and I'm sure she understands the powers that the state has vis-a-vis local government. And so Mr. Troise's comments are bizarre to me. The board on Bailey Avenue opposed that because it was not consistent with good land use planning. Ms. Osborne lost that 6-1. She described how the farmer proposing the project had difficulty farming because his land was surrounded by urban development, but the proposal would have put a thumb out into agricultural land, which would have been surrounded on 3 sides by agriculture. Also, with Williamson Act property, that we pay farmers or allow them reduced tax rates so that they can continue farming that land. So it would have created greater nuisance and greater conflict.
Jenelle?
I would like the 1 minute.
Yes.
That is exactly what the application for annexation was asking. What does LAFCO and the county need to allow this building to go forward? And instead they got a denial. And what has happened since then is builder's remedy has been filed for that property. We will have housing. It will increase by 20% in low income because that is part of the mandate for builder's remedy. It will create a buffer as the LAFCO board wanted, but they didn't tell them. So they slowed down the developers, they slowed down the housing needs, and they increased, by default, the number of low-income housing we're going to have. Now, it still will help our school district because it's a unified school district, but we're going to lose out as a city $8 million in impact fees while we're going to have to respond with police, fire, and they're going to pay 1.5 times more if they connect to our utilities.
Thank you. Frank? No. Oh. Well, we're not going to share minutes, but we'll move into the next question. And Jenelle, this is yours to begin. Recently, major insurance companies, Allstate, AAA, State Farm, have canceled home insurance policies due to the impact of climate change bringing threats of wildfires and flooding. Homeowners, renters, construction companies, and potential homeowners are being hit with double costs, canceled mortgages, and fear of losing everything. How will you help?
That is a really important topic given the type of community we are. We have individuals who've gone out on a limb and bought houses that are way overpriced for the age that they are, to be learning that they sit against wildland and might lose their home or not be able to insure it. So we, as the city of Lompoc, went in with the county and applied for and have a grant that is moving forward to develop a regional wildfire plan to better reinforce our ability so that hopefully insurance companies will see it as, we can insure you. So that's one step. The next step really is what the state keeps talking about. They keep presenting and offering opportunities, negotiating with insurance companies to take on insurance. But what we have to do is look at it as this is a state problem. So you need a strong advocate going back to the state and saying communities like this cannot afford to lose their house. Housing insecurity is already a problem. That is part of our homeless issue. So now you're driving up the costs by creating situations that are beyond homeowners' control, and you have insurance companies bolting on us. So what are you going to do as a state to help us retain our insurance? And for those of us that can afford it and are able to get insurance, we need to not just sit on the sidelines. We need to get involved, because someday it might be us for earthquakes or flooding. It is absolutely not something we can do alone or solve locally. It's going to require us to have a strong voice, a united voice, communicate to the state and federal level that this is going to damage the state and cause jobs to leave and residents to leave.
Thank you. Frank?
Well, let's take the math a step further. So if the insurance companies aren't insuring the homes, that means your property values are going down about 10, 20%. We're in the middle of a recession right now. The Fed hasn't lowered rates yet. So the single biggest asset in your portfolio is worth less, which means property taxes are lower, which means the county doesn't have the money to operate its budget because property taxes are the single biggest source of revenue that the supervisors have at their discretion, which also means Sacramento just announced they're going to have a $68 billion shortfall, which means that deficit that we were depending upon, the deficit they have and revenue we were depending upon is gone. If I came home to my wife and said, I just lost 50% of my income, you got to pull the kids out of school and we got to drain the savings account to pay for food, how long do you think she'd keep me in the house? Some of you know my wife, and you know that's not a very long period of time. Today in Santa Barbara, it's the exact same thing. We're going through this fallacy now of saying we have a balanced budget. Anybody can cut a budget in half and balance it. The trick is having a fully funded budget. We need another $100 million of revenue coming into the state of California, into the county. We've presented a plan, a 5-point plan that generates $200 million of revenue. My colleagues here, 2 of the items we put on the plan have been endorsed and supported by my colleagues here on stage. We've put that plan out to the public, private, academic sector, and to every economic agency here in Santa Barbara County. In over 9 months, do you know who told us we were out of our minds? No one. However, what did the county try to do? Acting like a bunch of 10,000 UCSB students, it made the decision that maybe it'd sell some weed to make up for the budget deficit and the revenue gap. And look where that got us. We're now subsidizing that industry. It's no longer a source of revenue. Question I would ask all of you as you go to your cars tonight: why is the county so allergic to money?
Okay.
Would you repeat the question?
Oh, sure. Recently, major insurance companies, Allstate, AAA, and State Farm have canceled home insurance policies due to the impact of climate change, bringing threats of wildfire and flooding. Homeowners, renters, construction companies, and potential homeowners are being hit with double costs, canceled mortgages, and fear of losing everything. How will you help?
Thank you. On the Board of Supervisors, different supervisors kind of take different issues. Fire is my issue. And when I represented the Vandenberg Village area, we got $4 million and a 3-year grant to do a lot of clearing to make it safer all around Lompoc and in that area. I serve on the Fire Safe Council, and it's the Fire Safe Council that got the grant for the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And we're working on that. We've had a forum on that. We pay the contractor so that the city of Lompoc doesn't have to do it. And we've been out clearing already. The Fire Safe Council also educates people about fire issues. We had a forum here. They are involved in home hardening education, chipping, grazing, defensible space. They'll come out and do audits and educate neighborhoods on how to be safer. We're eager to be more active in Lompoc. As far as fire insurance, it hasn't happened yet, but we expect that soon, and we're working legislatively, that people who actually adopt these practices for defensible space around their homes and around their broader community will get a reduction on insurance rates. There's a bit of a game of chicken going on in Sacramento right now. The state's regulations on insurance companies are very strict and really not fair, and so the insurance companies are clamping down on people, so people will clamp down on the legislature. And so there are negotiations going on now. We're going to see rates increase beyond what they were, but the expectation is that we will actually be able to get insurance because many people today can't, and that is a very vulnerable position to be in.
It is. 1 minute? Nope. Okay, we are all done with, shall I go on then? Yes, okay. Yeah, you have a minute. Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you, I'm sorry. Let's just recap because I'm taking notes here because it's important. And I'm a money guy, so you have to forgive me. So as you go home tonight, you already know that you might have some shrubs cleared out from your house, but your house is still worth 20% less. So there's nothing being done on the insurance side. You know there's no effort being made in public safety because that's a downstream problem, but we have no revenue to fund the programs that have been highlighted as upstream. Nothing's been said specifically tonight to address the homeless problem, and nothing's been said as it relates to fixing the housing issue here in your area. So I just wanted to take a status check and make sure and level set where we all were tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Then, Frank, you're on our next question here. And I just want to mention, I finished up all the questions last night, and I don't think we distributed it to any of the candidates. So, with that said, here's our next question. Family planning, health care, and wellness is an important concern. Many young parents travel either north or south for care. What can you do as supervisor to promote better and more accessible health care, especially for women?
Great question. So of the 5 initiatives we highlighted in our revenue plan, one of them is even more specific as it relates to childcare, and talking specifically about what that means for individual households, what it means for businesses, and what it means for tax revenue for the county. I'm a Republican, and I'm going to say something a little bit antithetical to some of you in the party. I don't view childcare as a cost. I see childcare as an investment. I see healthcare as an investment. We have neighbors in our neighborhood in Skyline Park over in Santa Ynez where one of our neighbors has to travel to Los Angeles in order to get cancer treatment. This man, who's now is 87 years old, is driving 2 hours a day back and forth, and he's technically blind in one eye, and he still plays golf, actually much better than me. The key issue in all of this is revenue. Nothing we're talking about tonight, and I want to be crystal clear, I'm not prioritizing anything because I've presented a plan that presents $200 million of recurring revenue. I don't have to prioritize this issue above the others because they are all funded. This is an important issue, and I don't want to demean it or denigrate it or say it's priority 2, 3, or 4. But please look at the revenue model we presented to you because these programs are fundable.
Thank you. Joan?
Yes, the county is responsible for providing health care for lower income residents, and you actually have one of our nicest public health offices right here in Lompoc. I also serve on the board of CalAIM. It administers the Medi-Cal program, and there's something really interesting, the CenCal board, which administers CalAIM. The CalAIM is a new program that is, again, going upstream and trying not to just deal with the symptoms of a disease, but actually deal with some of the causes. So one example is Lompoc's mobile market, the mobile farmers market. They get money from CalAIM so that they can provide fresh fruits and vegetables to people with diabetes and heart disease so that they can have a good diet and deal with it rather than pills at the end, deal with a better, healthier diet at the front. That's just one example of many programs. In addition, I've been very much a supportive of women's reproductive rights. I led efforts for the passage of Prop 1 last year. I know that Lompoc is a desert in a way for reproductive health care options, and I've been working very hard with Planned Parenthood to bring in services. The challenge is that despite Planned Parenthood being a highly respected medical organization, many people are sometimes afraid to partner with them. So it does aspire to offer more satellite services and cancer screenings and birth control consultations and other health care here right in Lompoc, and I'm working very hard to bring that about.
Thank you. Jenelle?
So the county's budget is 38% funded by state and federal, with 50% of it going towards mental health. So as you see the state budget funneling money into assistance, you also see them proposing Prop 1 where they're going to take 30% away from mental health, which means they're going to have less money. So there's a lot of shuffling rather than actually addressing the issue. Lompoc itself is used to taking care of itself. We have amazing local services. We have an amazing community hospital, not-for-profit hospital, that provides tons of services. The city of Lompoc supported CHC coming and providing CHC services for low-income health assistance. The county offices exist here for assistance with low-income health. Yes, Planned Parenthood absolutely should belong here. I was a longtime user of Planned Parenthood before I ever could afford insurance. And to know that they don't actually have services in town and you have to travel all the way to Santa Barbara or Santa Maria to get your birth control for a low cost or get a screening. Planned Parenthood saved my life. They screened me and found out I had a pre-cancerous cervical cancer. Had I not gone to them, I never would have known it and I wouldn't be here today. So I absolutely support them being present in our community and providing the services that are needed, so we as a community do not have to constantly travel to Santa Barbara or Santa Maria to get the services that we more than deserve. So, yes, as your county supervisor, that is my goal, is to advocate for what's needed in the communities it's lacking, make sure that those nonprofits that should exist here have an office here and we don't have to travel for those services, and to make sure that the state doesn't take away funding that it needs to be putting in a community that, again, is 30% low income. Santa Barbara and Santa Maria are in single digits.
1 minute, Frank.
Thank you. I want you to ask yourselves as you go home tonight, I supported the same initiative that the incumbent advocated for 8 years, which in 2022, the United Way, in conjunction with the Board of Supervisors, supported. Do you know what I got wrong as far as facts? You want to call me on another data point? We have in our proposal that it'll be 30 to 40 million per annum. Do you know what the United Way said for Santa Barbara County, which the supervisor here agreed to? It's over $300 million of recurring revenue per annum if implemented correctly. Ladies and gentlemen, where has the incumbent been on her own initiative?
1 minute, Joan.
I wonder what initiative. I don't even understand what you're talking about. But I do have a suggestion for Mayor Osborne. Let's go together to Planned Parenthood and get them a satellite office right here in Lompoc.
Sure.
Got a deal?
Absolutely.
All right.
That'll
Jenelle?
take care of. It's not so much a rebuttal, but the one thing the United Way did, and they do every 2 years, is a study that shows you the real cost measure of how much it actually costs to live in Santa Barbara County, and it's broken down by each city. I highly recommend you go and look at that. That is sobering when you look at the 3rd District, and Lompoc now being the seat of that, and how we have become the county's place to hide its problems and make it a burden. Lompoc doesn't want to be a burden. Lompoc wants to be an independent community that can sustain itself and contribute to the rest of the county's success. And that's what I want to advocate for. Change of direction, change of voice, lived experience, able to vocalize what you and the rest of the 3rd District has been lacking.
Thank you. Okay, our last question, and we'll start with Joan. What other government agencies, nonprofit organizations, service clubs, schools will you be collaborating with to address some of the issues of healthcare, mental wellness, homelessness, etc.?
Each of those areas has different groups, but I'm working very much with the school district. As I mentioned, I'm on the board of the CenCal. They administer funds that are now much more flexible through this new program, CalAIM. That means that every school in Lompoc now has mental health resources available to it. That never happened before. And so it's very exciting, the kinds of opportunities that are occurring here. They're dealing with young people and pulling them together in small groups to talk. There was one thing that really impressed me when somebody from the Lompoc School District came to the CenCal board. She said a young man who'd been having problems, acting out, aggressive, headed the wrong way, was involved in these groups, and he came to her afterwards and he said, "I didn't know there were other ways to be a man." Now, that really spoke to me. So mental health services in the schools in Lompoc is happening, and it's happening through CenCal's CalAIM program. It's an odd thing because now the schools have to learn how to bill Medi-Cal, and so there's a lot of behind-the-scenes administration and learning that has to take place. But ever since COVID, mental health among young people has been a top priority issue because that, coupled with social media, has really created a downward spiral for a lot of young people, and it really takes the entire community. So I just attended the Teen Center fundraiser here in Lompoc. It was a great event. And I'm doing all I can to be involved with young people because that's Lompoc's future.
Thank you. Jenelle?
As Lompoc's mayor, what I've recognized about Lompoc is that's us. That's what we do. In my role as mayor, as our role as city council, as the city, we are working constantly with all the partners that exist here. The hospital, community hospital, it's its own board, but we have to work in partnership with them. The school district, we're so grateful for the new superintendent. She is so present. She is so eager to improve our community, and we can't be more grateful for that. And the new board is really taking on the needs of the community and working to resolve those. So we meet regularly with all the leadership of those organizations. The city is a strong funder of the chamber, which supports our business community. I wish we had an economic development department at the city, but since we can't afford that, we've given the money to the chamber to try and support our local businesses and expand that. The city meets with the base on a regular basis to understand what's happening out on the base. What do we need to do to support the airmen and guardians living in our community and those contractors and businesses that are coming to the community? We meet regularly with those businesses growing out there, touring SpaceX, understanding why and what they need in order to grow and stay here, because in past years, they were leaving. They weren't going to stay, and now they're expanding and taking over Slick 6. So it is the way that Lompoc is. It is how I have led, is working with partners. You cannot solve this community's problems in a silo. You have to have partners with the nonprofits, with the other organizations in the community. You have to have dialogues, you have to support each other, and you have to advocate for each other. I want to take that experience and take it to the 3rd district's level and the county level for you.
Thank you. Frank?
Thank you. Everything we're talking about are the characteristics of a system in distress. I go back to where we started. We're not working from a surplus, everybody. We don't have the cash to fund any of this. I had the opportunity before running for this office to ask my constituents in each one of these areas and say, what do you want us to focus on? The first thing, we do not have the money. Period. I have too much respect for everybody here in the audience to placate with a bunch of a word salad about how everything's going to be great. It's not. You all know intuitively, status quo's gone. The next 4 years are going to be very, very difficult for the entire county, let alone the state of California. You've heard here tonight, your property values are going to be lower. You've heard unequivocally, safety will go down. You've heard as well, healthcare is not going to be there to sustain. You've heard what the housing problem is. You've heard that no one has the spine to stand up to Sacramento. That is a system in distress. I'm Irish Catholic. I came from a very rough upbringing of very tough Irish cops and firemen. And the hardest decision we had to make when they came home was to say, maybe you don't go to the bar tonight. We dealt with the problem head on as if it was family. I have too much respect for you to say anything other than we need to make the revenue. And the most important part, if we want to really lay the guilt on you tonight, we really haven't talked about education and the impact on all of this to the kids and our legacy, and all due respect to the age of this room. Think about the decisions you're making now, not only for us as a group, but for our children and for our grandchildren. We need the revenue.
Thank you. I'm going to skip letting you all have 1 more minute because you all have 2 more minutes to make a closing statement. And Jenelle, you'll lead off, please.
I want to thank you all for coming out tonight, for those watching at home and for those listening on the local radio. This is a chance for Lompoc to have strong representation at the county level. We have not had that in a very long time, since 1993 when Diane Owens did not run for re-election. So, do we want to continue to have someone else spend 2 years getting to know us, or do you want someone who understands your community, who has worked for the past 8 years, technically add 4 to that as Economic Development Committee, that really loves this community, understands this, and wants to advocate on your behalf and work to make us part of the county, not a burden on the county? This is your chance to have someone who actually has lived experience in this community, but also understands Goleta, having been a commuter and early lived there and made a choice not to continue to because I couldn't afford it, who understands the San Ynez Valley and the difference that they are and where they don't want things, but they depend on us to house their employees, and where their ag land is and compared to the vintners. This is really a unique opportunity. We're a very unique county, and I think it's an opportunity for us to change the direction for the entire county, not just Lompoc, but Lompoc is its seat. Whoever carries Lompoc carries this vote and will make it to the Board of Supervisors. Know that. You have power in your voice and your vote. I ask you to trust me and understand that I am doing this because we need representation.
Thank you, Jenelle Osborne. Frank Troise, please.
Thank you. First off, I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. And when I grew up, my father said to me early on, you learn it, you earn it, and you return it. And I feel very, very blessed to be here tonight and be part of this process. And I want to be clear, I'm here not because I want this position. I'm here because this is the right thing to do. The question you need to ask yourself tonight, we as a county need $100 million, and we need to do it now. The hard question you need to ask yourself, I'm a Yankees fan, and I probably lost half the room just saying that. The reality is there comes a point in time when you say we need to achieve the objective that we need to. Here, ask yourself, who are you most comfortable with that will stand up to the governor and say no? Who are you most comfortable with that could raise $100, $200 million? Look at my background. You will see very quickly that that number is not hundreds of millions, it's billions in terms of what I've achieved. You will find very quickly as you look at that, I want you to ask yourself, who do you want in the room in Santa Barbara? Who do you want in the room in Sacramento? Who do you want in the room in Washington, D.C. Is your advocate fighting for you? More importantly, who do you think's going to win? I hope I gave you a line of sight towards what's achievable here in Lompoc, and I say this respectfully. There's a place for people where it's important they execute, and there's a place where you say, maybe this is not the right time. Because Janelle's right, for certain things, you don't want to be learning on the job. Lastly, the question I go back to at the beginning. Walk to your cars tonight and ask yourself, who makes you feel safer in terms of a plan? I would be honored and humbled to represent you in the county, and more importantly, I hope you exercise your right on March 5th to vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joan Hartmann, please hold your applause. One more.
Thank you. How you run your campaign will tell a lot about how you will behave in office. There's been a lot in the newspapers lately about Mr. Troy's campaign being in the red, so you might consider that with his grandiose claims about revenue. For me, the most important thing to consider in an elected leader is trust. You have to earn trust, you have to be trustworthy, you have to be honest, you can't overstate things, and you have to have positive and not selfish intentions and strong competencies and a record of actually achieving results. Our social fabric depends on trust, and a lot of it is pulling apart. But 67% of people still trust local government. And I want to build on that trust. I get up every morning thinking, what can I do to be responsive to my constituents, to work with communities, to make things better, to earn trust? I've received endorsements from Congressman Carbajal, Senator Limon, Assemblymember Hart, fellow board members, and elected department heads. The county's treasurer and also its auditor trust my fiscal prudence. The current and former district attorneys, the District Attorneys Association, and the former Undersheriff Barney Malekian trust in my leadership on criminal justice issues. Council members from 8 cities, all of the 8 cities in the county, trust in my collaborative work. The Sierra Club and the Center for Biological Diversity trust in my environmental stewardship. The Santa Barbara Women's Committee and Planned Parenthood trust that I stand up for women and families. Dolores Huerta, the leading civil rights, labor, and civil rights activist, trusts in my work on social justice. These endorsements are expressions of trust by regional leaders who want to continue working with me to get things done. These people and organizations have done the work to vet my candidacy. If you trust them, you can trust me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to all the 3 candidates who came to the forum tonight. And before we close, we're very quickly going to go over how you can vote safely in this election. Brenda's going to put up a new slide for us here. Number 1, register to vote. You can register to vote online. There's the website. The second one then is you can choose to vote by mail or by placing your signed and dated envelope containing your ballot in a secure official Santa Barbara County drop box from February the 6th till March the 5th. And in Lompoc, these are located at City Hall, the Civic Center here, the library, Vandenberg Village as well, and the Department of Social Services on West Laurel. Then we're on to slide number 5. And you can vote in person at the locations specified in your voter guide here. And we'd like to thank everyone again for participating in this dual language forum. There are many folks to thank, which made it possible. I'm not going to thank them all, except Jose Ferreras. Thank you so very much for your live interpretation. Yes. And for anyone interested in information about AAUW or the League of Women Voters North County, we're right outside here in the hall. Now I'm going to ask you all to scurry out, and for the 2 candidates who are running in the 4th district to come on up.